A Jewish person wearing a prayer shawl is heard publicly chanting the Shema. The regime's state-funded clerics and its judiciary have ruled that such worship constitutes a disturbance of the peace. Police arrest and manhandle the worshiper, who is jailed and subject to all-night strings of humiliations. Before coming before a judge, authorities ask the court to banish the Jew from the site for a period of 15 days. The judge goes far beyond. The banishment will last an entire month. What happened next is perhaps the least likely scenario. Israel does nothing about it. Israeli media barely reports the story. It is considered of no interest to the public, nor the government. Why not? Because it happened in Israel. These are words from the Haaretz online blog of Bradley Burston, and he is describing last week's outrageous arrest of activist and Reform Jewish leader Anat Hoffman. Anat, the director of the Israeli Religious Action Center, was leading a group of women in prayer on the women's side of the Western Wall. And because she was wearing a tallis and singing the Shema in an audible voice, she was arrested for disturbing the peace. In her own words, "It was a traumatic experience. I was pulled along the ground by my wrists, strip-searched, shackled by hands and feet, and left to sleep on the floor of a jail cell with nothing but my tallis to keep me warm." There are petitions we can sign to express our outrage at this incident and at what it means. And there are and will continue to be opportunities for activism. The fact is that this will ultimately be a legal battle in Israel. Our moral indignation is warranted, and our voices, all our voices, should be heard because we can bring important pressure to bear. But what I'd like to speak about tonight for a few moments is how we should think about ourselves as Reform Jews when we hear of such events. Anat Hoffman's arrest and reprehensible treatment last week is an extreme repercussion of Judaism's traditional attitude toward women. It is clearly not the norm. But our Jewish state serves sometimes as a laboratory for the best and worst outcomes of our traditional Jewish recipes when they are force-fed to a population. The ultra-Orthodox establishment maintains civic control over Judaism's religious sites, and the strictest interpretation of Orthodox Jewish law is applied to them. And as a result, 1/2 of the Jewish population, whom the Torah teaches us also stood at Sinai to receive the commandments, continues to be degraded and dehumanized. Judaism's traditional recipe establishes women as having very different roles and responsibilities from men, and clearly unequal status in religious settings. The rabbinic sources we have begin by not obligating women to the same mitzvot as men, for example, reading from the Torah, or being part of a minyan, or leading a community in prayer, or as we know so painfully this week, wearing a talit or singing out loud. And they ultimately ban them from such activities. This is not to say that all recipes call for purposeful humiliation of women. Far from it. Our traditional Jewish recipes honor women in many ways. But when it comes to our recipes for prayer, for learning, and the functioning of our synagogues, women are a non-essential ingredient. And this is where Reform Judaism enters to do its important work. When we examine this situation, we find competing values. We encounter a thrust within our tradition that is determined to keep women separate and silent in a religious setting. And we also find the values that say that each of us is made in God's image, that the dignity of each individual is of the utmost importance, and that when our actions have caused pain, even unintentionally, or produced an unjust reality, we are required to do teshuvah. So from its very inception, Reform Judaism has looked at these two competing sets of values and chose to elevate the latter. We found that denying women full participation in Jewish life dishonored their humanity. We believe in admitting when you have been wrong, and we believe in bringing redemption to the enslaved. In this case, we have all been enslaved by the traditional view of women, the view that insists that women have nothing to give in a religious setting, that women have no special gifts to bring as teachers, as prayer leaders, or even as worshipers. We have been enslaved by our blindness, and the Reform Judaism that we are a part of insists that we free ourselves, that we do teshuvah by inserting women back into these settings and into our prayer book, and that we honor each individual's needs and gifts, and that means fully including women. One reason that we change recipes, we Reform Jews, change our traditional recipes, is because we find an unethical or unconscionable ingredient in them. Perhaps our ancestors did not recognize it as such, but we do. And this is one of those times. And our bravery in taking that ingredient out is something to be proud of as Reform Jews, as all progressive Jews. Our perspective is a source of redemption for our Jewish world. We do not force it on anyone, but we hold fast to it and lift it up as one of our greatest innovations and an option for Jews everywhere. So we stand proudly with Anat Hoffman, with the women of the wall whenever they pray, and with the men who support them and take risks for them. And in just a moment, before we rise for Aleinu, I invite us to sing the 6 words of Shema one more time and listen to the sound of our voices mingled and know that this is a unique and essential ingredient and a Reformed Jewish gift to the world. So before we turn to Aleinu on page 282, I invite you to please rise and join me in those 6 words of Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, l'teit gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On page 287, may we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Together, loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu, Yihi Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. Please be seated.